Welcome to Taiwan Report News Brief, news and analysis from Taiwan. I'm Donovan Smith. Welcome to our KMT Reform Special. The KMT Reform Committee has released their report. Has it produced a viable blueprint for the way forward for the KMT to regain their footing? Will their new cross-strait proposals fly with the public? Has KMT Chair Johnny Chiang hit a home run or a damp grilled squid? Let's take a look. All right, so the KMT Reform Committee has released their four-part report. The first part is on cross-straits issues, and I'm going to go over that a little later in the show. Let's take a look at the first three parts that deal with practical organizational issues. Now, the second section was on KMT Organizational Reform. Some of the better ideas in their proposals include to avoid the Central Standing Committee being dominated by elderly figures, they're going to limit members to 2 4-year terms. They plan to bring more locally elected KMT politicians and local party officials from around the country into the system to bring the party closer to the people and to the grassroots. In short, to make the party less top-down and more bottom-up. They're also going to create a party post for digital marketing. One other idea that makes some sense is they will require all party list candidates for legislature to be approved by over half of party delegates, which should help weed out some of the more controversial picks. The party list in the 2020 election was widely despised, even by many inside the KMT. There's also a curious line about creating a retired military committee to give, quote, even higher honor and service as the former Huang Fuxing. I don't know what they're up to here, but it's possible this is a way to try and co-opt and control this famously conservative bloc in the party, but that's just speculation on my part. The third section is about trying to rebuild relations with younger Taiwanese who have almost entirely abandoned the party. Going forward, the party will be setting aside 1 in 5 party list candidates for people under 40. The rest of this section is about opening up more opportunities for young people in the party and for their voices to be heard. Now, the success of that will depend quite a bit on how it is implemented. It is also worth noting that in the current environment, the kind of young people who would join the KMT are probably not very representative of their generation. There was also an interesting bit about turning local party chapters into party think tanks, but it doesn't really say very much about what that actually would mean in practice. So the fourth section is on finances. Mostly this is about saving money, like on rent and things like that, raising money through various means, such as fundraising events and getting members to raise more money, and to raise party dues to 500 NT. I believe it's 200 right now. It all sounded fairly reasonable, but the financial burden from their massive pension liabilities seems all but insurmountable. They also plan to leverage their historical assets and their intellectual property holdings, but they weren't specific about what exactly that means. Now, overall, most of this sounds reasonable and addresses their problems, but the devil is in the details. The KMT is an old, rigid organization, so much of this will be hard to implement, and it will be hard to get a lot of people in the party to change their ways and go along with this. If Johnny Chiang pulls this all off, the party will be in a much better position in coming elections. But the hard part is ahead of him, and it's still an uphill battle. So the cross-strait part of the KMT Reform Committee report is the part that's getting all the attention and the heat. In short, the 4 parts of their proposal for cross-strait reforms here are, or principles, I should say, is upholding the Republic of China's national sovereignty, safeguarding freedom, democracy, and human rights, prioritizing the safety of Taiwan, and creating win-win cross-strait relations. So the opening of Part 1 reads, insist on the sovereignty of the Republic of China and reject one country, 2 systems. In Part 2, they call for a human rights treaty with China. Good luck with that. In Part 3, they state cross-strait peace is a shared responsibility of both sides of the strait. The KMT calls for reaching a cross-strait code of conduct and mechanisms for prevention of untoward incidents. And in Part 4, They have this: sound cross-strait economics and trade should be created by mutual benefits, win-win situations, and transparent oversight. The KMT calls for legislative action on a bill titled Statute Governing Oversight on the Concluding of Cross-Strait Agreements to be completed as soon as possible. Interestingly, the term mainland was not used in the report proper, only in the addendum at the end of the report. Now, the part that's very, very interesting is what is missing entirely: the 1992 consensus. Though it is not in the report proper, they do address it in an addendum and at the end of the report at their presentation. They propose that the 1992 consensus should be viewed as, quote, a historical description of past cross-strait interaction. Where have we heard something like that before? I'll let a KMT critic say it, as reported by CNA. Darby Liu, a member of the KMT's Policymaking Central Standing Committee, called the proposals announced Friday the worst cross-strait theory he had ever seen, questioning the no mention of the 1992 consensus and whether the KMT's leadership was solely parroting the rhetoric of the DPP. The proposals made by the panel were mostly the same as those broached by the DPP. No wonder that the KMT has been described as a small green, by which he means a party in the green camp dominated by the DPP, he said. The CNA report continues. In response to Liu's criticism, KMT Chairman Johnny Chiang said he felt there was a deep generation gap within the party, which needs to be mended through communication and integration. The KMT needs to face up to this reality and seek to expound the values that the party upholds. Otherwise, its reform efforts will go nowhere, Chiang said. Quote, the KMT is by no means a small green party, and I cannot accept such a comment, he said. The KMT will stick to its middle way philosophy and spirit of the ROC as set by its founding father, Sun Yat-sen, because democracy and freedom are not exclusive assets of the DPP, he stressed, alluding to Sun's desire for a democratic China. In terms of cross-strait ties, Chiang said the most important thing is to find the key to solving the current stalemate between the two sides. The misunderstanding of and distrust about the 1992 consensus among Taiwan's people was a result of the changes brought about by the DPP and Beijing's actions, not the KMT, he said. There's some truth about in what he just said there. So, 5 members of the cross-strait panel also voiced their views regarding the proposals they made. The panel's members pointed out that the consensus has been seriously defamed, losing its function and appeal in Taiwan society. They said that the KMT needs something new beyond the 1992 consensus to create extra room for it to rekindle its interaction with mainland China, while at the same time win back voters. Due to the DPP's interpretation of the consensus and general public distrust of China, especially given its attempts to pressure Taiwan after Tsai declined to accept the consensus, Taiwanese people, especially young voters, have made the link between the KMT and the 1992 consensus and equated the party's acceptance of the consensus as the KMT being pro-China. The KMT camp has more recently begun to openly object to being described as such, emphasizing they are instead pro-peace and pro-good cross-strait relations. Quite simply, I'm blown away. There had been plenty of indications, including from some of Johnny Chiang's comments, that the 92 consensus would be retained in some form. It's not. It's gone. It's dead. He's right when he says this doesn't make the KMT a little green party, but this moves the party from the deep blue end of the spectrum to lighter blue. The characterizing of the 1992 consensus as history is similar to President Tsai's formulation, though hers refers narrowly to the 1992 meetings, and the new KMT one to the process that was held under the rubric of the so-called consensus. On paper, the four parts of this are similar to the DPP's stances on the issues, but differences come from what we know about the parties. In Part 1, upholding ROC sovereignty, this is the official line of President Tsai, but she clearly wants to move more in the direction of the country being called Taiwan instead. The KMT, we can assume, are more serious about the ROC part. The call for various laws and agreements relating to China are more China-centric and focused than what the DPP would offer, but the chance that China would sign a human rights agreement is laughable. It probably wouldn't even occur to the DPP. They also indicate that they clearly want better relations and economic ties with China than the DPP does. But the emphasis on freedom, democracy, protecting Taiwan, and clearly stating that the 1992 consensus is gone and one country, two systems and actions by China are essentially hostile, they've moved much closer to the center. Not quite there, of course. However, it also remains to be seen if the public actually believes the party really intends to move in this direction. We also don't know how strong the backlash will be inside the party to this. Chiang may now be out on a limb. He's got until the next party chair election in May next year to convince the party it is on the right track. If not, he'll be kicked out. If he does, that may open the door to more reforms. This is going to be very, very interesting to watch. All right, tune in tomorrow for some more normal news. And we'll be back. Please hit like and subscribe and all that good stuff.
This has been brought to you by the Taiwan Report. For more content like this, become our patron at report.tw.
哎呦，就是那个台湾狗啦，最喜欢我的台湾狗了。